Thank you, Count Corla. And thank you to the Rural Group for bringing forward the motion today. On Monday, we saw the launch of the new Plan for Rural Development, Our Rural Future. I welcome the fact that the Government recognised the need for a plan, and many of the measures contained within it are badly needed in rural Ireland. I want to dwell on one particular problem. Count Corla, the National Planning Framework envisages a Karl Marx policy of corralling and forcing people to live in high-density, ghettoised settings with no infrastructure to support them. The county councils across the country are at this point drafting county development plans. Wexford County Council, after submitting their draft plan, received a 24-page letter from the Office of the Planning Regulator setting out recommendations pursuant to the ministerial guidelines. Now, you will recall, Count Corla, in June of last year on the floor of the Dáil, the then Minister for State for Housing and Local Government, Damien English, confirmed on the floor of the Dáil that there were no minimum densities in the specific planning policy requirements, SPPR4. Count Corla, notwithstanding the Minister's confirmation, the planning regulator had the temerity to write to Wexford County Council insisting on densities, and here's the letter, not less than 20 or 30 dwellings per hectare. The tone and tenure of his letter is the equivalent of a missive one might expect to receive from the Politburo. The letter entirely misrepresents the densities requirement. That's if one is to have any regard at all for what the Minister confirmed to this House on the floor of the Dáil last June. The planning regulator, in his letter to Wexford County Council, sets out a plethora of recommendations that will shut down rural Wexford and ghettoise our towns. We need only to look at the early 20th century to witness what happened in Eastern Europe at the hands of the ideologues such as Karl Marx and Joseph Stalin. The planning regulator seems to be of the view that a chief executive of Wexford County Council can amend a county development plan at his insistence or behest. The last great Stalinist sentence in his missive required the CEO to confirm his recommendations and respond within 5 working days. An outrageous demand and an absolute assault on rural democracy. The power grab by the regulator against every rural constituency in Ireland, including your own, Count Corla, where I understand an 88-page letter has been received by Kildare County Council from the planning regulator. Mr Justice Kearns, in the High Court, made plain the requirement of county councils in forming a county development plan. He said, and I quote, "The planning authority must have regard to guidelines. They are not required to slavishly adhere to those guidelines." Count Corla, that judgment has been upheld consistently by the courts. The planning regulator, Mr Cousins, is simply out of control. And having regard to the correspondence to Wexford County Council, his ideological views and his lack of knowledge with regard to his own remit, he must consider his position. And I'd urge Minister Darragh O'Brien must take action immediately to put an end to this Stalinist regime in the planning regulator's office and remove him. If the planning regulator, Mr Cousins, is allowed to have his way, he will close rural schools, he will decimate local GAA clubs, and he will ghettoise our towns. Rural Ireland will become one massive Merthyr Tydfil. Thank you, Count Corla.